Hello, a bright African good afternoon to you and you and you and you and your loved ones as well. So it is 5 p.m. in Sao Tome and Principe. It's GMT time, and it is time for another Follow Me to Africa conversation. And this one is going to be a very insightful one. It's a special edition of the Follow Me to Africa conversations brought to you by CliffNote TV in the diaspora. My name is Ankweta Beatrice Achaleke. I am the serial author of the Africa for Smart Kids book series, publisher of Globunto Books, founder of Follow Me to Africa, and your host. As always, I'm delighted when we have a conversation going. And again, this one is going to center around a book. But before we get to that, let me remind you, if you have not yet signed up on CliffNote TV, please make sure that you go to cliffnote.com and sign up so that you don't miss out on any one of our programs, because that channel, CliffNote TV, is a internet TV series created to bring together Africans in the diaspora and on the continent to celebrate their achievements and to acknowledge one another, to know that we're here, to show up and be counted and be listened to. So we air the Follow Me to Africa conversations every Friday at 5 p.m. GMT. That's Sao Tome time. Wherever you are in the world, check GMT time and you can join the conversation. And today we are having a returning guest. We're having a returning guest, Sam Tita, my friend, my brother, my colleague. Someone who is so insightful that I just like listening to because I learn a whole lot from him. So we are going to launch his book, the book. Open your ears, open your eyes, and please get your families, get your friends together, because this conversation is for the whole family. It's intergenerational, it's educational, it's insightful. So grab your water and bring your family on. The title of the book we're talking about today is Black Truth. Can you digest that? Black Truth, healing 500 years of colonial lies. So how about that? This is a family conversation. Before I introduce my guest, we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we'll get straight into the conversation. So use the short break to get your drink, get your whatever you need, and bring your families along to the TV, and let's have this conversation together.
CliffNote in Diaspora Television is an internet online TV service. What sets us apart is a unique combination of hit African content, first and exclusive international free movies, series, musics, news, events, documentaries, tourism, teleshopping shows, youth TV programs, and live interviews. CliffNote Diaspora Television is available throughout sub-Saharan Africa and to the diaspora markets worldwide. Take your entertainment with you wherever you go. Watch on your smartphone, tablet, laptop, smart TV, depending on your device. Watch free movies with CliffNote Movies Television. Stop searching for free movies websites and watch CliffNote Movies Television. Watch your favorite African shows anywhere at any time. Don't forget to check out our top 5 TV channels created to get you informed. TV1, CliffNote in Diaspora Television. TV2, CliffNote Youth Television. TV3, CliffNote Movies Television. TV4, CliffNote Teleshopping Television. TV5, CliffNote Tourism Television. To start watching, sign up at www.cliffnote.com and follow the easy steps. Once you're done, log into the CliffNote website or app on your device, click on any one of our 5 TV channels, and hit play. We will be very satisfied and happy to welcome you to our team as one of our new business partners. Contact info@cliffnote.com +34 631 279811. Website www.cliffnote.com.
Welcome back to Follow Me to Africa Conversations. You are tuned into CliffNote TV in the diaspora, and we are having a Follow Me to Africa conversation, this time doing a book launch. We are unleashing, we are igniting, we are uncovering, we are discussing, we are sharing 50 years of, Black Truth. We are sharing Black Truth in an attempt to heal 50 years of colonial lies. And if you are a person of African descent like me and my host, whom I'm going to introduce to you right away, you know that this conversation is long overdue. It's long overdue. And Sam rightly starts it in his book by saying it is unfortunate that we're doing this conversation at this kind of conversation at this time and on this topic. And I want to take him by his word. Sam, so you're back to the conversation, and it's always a pleasure having you here. So I know it's been very stormy out there, and in spite of that, you made it to the studio because this is a very, very critical, crucial conversation. How are you doing, brother?
I am doing very well, Beatrice. Thank you so much. Yes, for your audience and viewers, we had an ice storm here in Toronto, where we're located, and so it just slowed everything down. Getting to the studio was treacherous. It was, are we going to be able to do it? Are we not? But at the end of the day, like important conversation that has to be had, that we braved it, took our time, got here just a tin bit late, but here we are. So we're glad. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, and those of you who are joining in, this is the conversation. We're starting a little bit late, but don't worry, we catch up on everything that we set out to catch on, even though the 500 years of Black truth cannot be told in one conversation. But Sam pulled it together in his book, and we're going to give you the essence of that conversation. We're going to ignite it and invite you to do your own conversation, find your own truth. What are your own Black truth? So without any further ado, we're going to get straight into the book. So, Sam, what is, Black Truth? How did you come about that title? And what was it like writing that book? Why was it unfortunate, but incontournable? Why was it unfortunate but unavoidable? Excuse
Well,
me.
that's so. You see, it's an emotional topic for those of us who have come to terms with who we are and how the world perceives us. Unfortunate because it's 2023 now. When the book was written, of course, was it came out in 2022. That in 2022, in the 21st century, despite everything that we know, despite everything that is going on, we still have to be having the kind of conversation we're having right now. We still have to be talking about anti-Black racism and how the world seems to have, call it a hatred towards people that look like us. It is so unfortunate because we are a progressive people. We are a loving people. I mean, goodness, you know how it is when strangers come home to us. Our arms are open. We're so welcoming. We're so inviting. And for the world to still be seeing us in the way that was painted 500 years ago when those who invaded Africa came and started that conversation, to still be going through that 500 years later is terribly unfortunate. And so we had to speak the truth, but not from a point of lamentation, as though we're rolling on the floor and mourning and crying. No, no such thing. We're looking for, and we found that healing comes when truth comes, because truth will shed light. It will bring material information that people, and then now that they know, it changes everything. So we're hoping that in a little way, this book is going to make a contribution towards bringing healing to the Black community, the African community, and diaspora all over the world.
Thank you. So, as you said, it's an emotional conversation, and we're just going to be going back and forth. And setting it straight, why it was the time it's important, and the conversation is important, even though it is unfortunate. Give our viewers a little bit of your background. Where do you come from? What was your journey right up to saying this is the time to write this book, this Black truth, to unveil Black truth, and to invite us to the path of healing?
All right. So originally from Cameroon, like yourself, you and I, we went to school together, high school and college, and always had a love for reading, always had the desire to positively influence the minds of people. and traveled to Canada at the age of 19, got married to my beautiful wife at the age of 20, and we're married now. It's going to be 33 years. We have 4 grown children and 2 grands and 1 more grand coming. So that's the journey. Naomi and I are business people here in Canada and in Cameroon, and we also minister. Some people call me a pastor, but we don't pastor a church, but we have a very, very thriving, dynamic ministry that impacts people right across Canada, in Cameroon, and other parts of the world. But the thing is, for a long time, Beatrice, I focused on just preaching the gospel, because I figured, listen, when God changes the heart of a person, that person is bound to do the right thing. But then 2016 happened, and the elections in the United States with Donald Trump running, it started happening, and it seems to have just pulled to the surface a lot of the problems in the United States, especially pertaining to the perception of African Americans and Black people generally. And I saw an increase in criminality towards people of African descent. And the funny thing is, it seemed like Donald Trump could do no wrong. I mean, I have to. This was a crucial point of it for me. Okay, it seemed like the man could do no wrong, despite all of the things that he would say and do, and people became emboldened to express hate, and it just continued until when George Floyd. When George Floyd was murdered by the police officer who put his knee on his neck for 29 seconds and killed the man, I decided, you know what, there was no way that the God I serve, the God that I know, a God of justice, a God of equity, a God of love, there is no way that I could sit down. And I'm thinking, if Jesus Christ was here in this world, would he just continue preaching about heaven and not talk about the injustices that Black people and Aboriginal people all over the world have experienced for all of these years? And my conclusion was a resounding no. And so, as a preacher, my 7th book is a deviation from what people know me for. I typically just write purely Christian books, but in this particular instance, especially during the time that I was studying for my master's degree and doing some research, it came to the fore for me that I absolutely had to get in the ring and do this battle against anti-Black racism. But the thing is, to do it not in the way that everybody else is doing it. I mean, I was saying, God, you have to give me a unique message so that we could also make a contribution and not just make noise about stuff that others have done for so long. And that's the approach that we took in writing this book. Now, when I wrote the book, I was so full of frustration, Beatrice. My original title for the book was Black Truths and White Lies. That was my original title. How rapists, murderers, and kidnappers became known as slave masters. And my wife said to me, honey, if you're hoping for the general public to read this book, then you have to kind of modify the title so that people don't get turned off from it just by looking at the title. So prayerfully, she came up with this, gave me some ideas, and we came up with Black Truths. Because at the end of the day, it really wasn't just about talking and being an activist. It was really about really beginning to heal, not just for ourselves, but for people of African descent and those in the diaspora as well. And so really, thank God for my wife, because that's why this title is as effective as it is today that we have on this book.
Black Truth, Healing 500 Years of Colonial Lies. You know what, when I hear your narrative and how you came about the title, thank you, Naomi, for that wisdom. The female wisdom is always something. I see the healing process there as well. Because when you see all of this, it triggers you as a person of African descent. It triggers you, and you get tempted to do the thing that the system that was put in place was put there to, was designed to make you do, to be bitter, to be, attacked, to be emotional. And sometimes when we set out at that pace and we notice the trigger, for people who have done the work or who are doing that healing work, you realize that you grow along the line. And that growth mirrors not just in the content, in the way you narrate, but also in the way the face that you give to that narration that you have in your book. So I understand you very well. That has happened to me a lot of times, that I changed book titles along the way, like 3, 4, 5 times to come to the final one. And I see that to be like a growth path. Talking about the growth path, I see it in the books as well. I love the way you begin with an analogy as an experiment. You provoke people to think, and you're wondering, like, where is he going to? Where is he taking me to? When you take us to the house of this policeman who is kind of being violent towards his wife, and no, this gentleman, this white male guy, and then the two police officers that show up and go away with the lie that he tells them, in spite of all the evidence that, like, you put in your book. And then I'm like, okay, where is he taking me to? Where is the black truth now? Where is it? And then gradually, when you read through the book, it begins to unfold. And so you set a very interesting pace there that, for me, it's really, really invites us to read the book, not from looking for value or confirmations to be even more angry, but to reflect, to think. So how did you come about that structure that starts in a very kind of nice way, a very innocent way, let's put it that way, a very innocent and yet it's very contemporary. It's something that almost everyone knows. And then you dive us, kind of take us right deep into history. How did you come about that structure?
Well, the thing is, thank you so much, Beatrice. The thing is, I am a thinking person, and I tend not to run with anything without giving it thought. And I find that I might be the hardest person to convince about anything, but the moment I am convinced, I become almost unstoppable as a disciple, because now I understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so the idea is not to be incendiary and to provoke people emotions to do things that they probably will regret doing, but to make people think. And the truth is this: if you are a battered woman or a battered man, and an interview was going to be given on to explain what happened, you ask the victim who has suffered what happened. You don't ask the person who hurt them or injured them or who continues to injure them. That's not the person you get the story from. And so you have this situation, obviously, where we, as people of African descent, we were kidnapped, we were raped, we were murdered. All of these things happened, and then the same people who did these terrible things are the people who have written the history books that you and I studied, Beatrice. I know more about American history coming through school in Cameroon than I knew about kingdoms. And as a matter of fact, I knew nothing about kingdoms in Africa. I knew nothing about governments in Africa and the things and the achievements of Africans and people of African descent. Knew nothing about those things. So we're saying, at the end of the day, when this is all done, in the beginning of the book, the information that we're passing on and hoping that people understand is we have to question everything that has been written about Africa. And you and I and people like us, and hopefully when we begin, I can't say we begin because others have already begun this journey, as we join in and increase our voice as a people, then maybe the academy across the globe will begin to embrace what this truth is. because the academy is so powerful. It raises up generations. And until this information gets into the academy and we begin to accept it and teach it as knowledge, regular knowledge, just part of the normal dominant narrative, not just a footnote in history. If we can begin to do that, then we've achieved quite a bit. And whether we see the fullness of the results in our lifetime, you and I, we don't know, but we would have at least set the right course for the future.
That is exactly what what got me into writing. I think people who know me knew that after coming from that colonial education system, you go abroad to the Western countries thinking that you belong. I mean, we're speaking the languages, we know the history, and then you realize that you put in all the efforts, but you can never belong because you have it's like a stigma, it's like a stamp. Like, they call it David Star. Some religions, the Jews would call it the David Star. It's on you and you can't really be. And you turn around and you say, so what is it? What is the game being played? I know you more than you know me. So what is the problem now? And I think it has to do with what you also write in the book. And I want us to talk a little bit about how inventing the lie led to the corruption of the narrative, as you put it in the book. I just love the chapters and the chapter titles. The fact that you put the attacks and all of that, and then the corruption of the narrative is one of the chapters. And I'd like us to go from there, based on the system of education that we have, and based on the system of education that is still here in 2023 as we are talking. That system that was put in place back then, some 500 years ago, counting, and still it's in place. And we have been making a lot of conversations around this. We've seen how wrong the system is, and it is still in place. It's in place on the African continent. It's in place in the diaspora, and we know that this has to be changed. How did inventing the lie led to the corruption of that narrative, and what can we do from your perspective today to be able to correct the narrative? Not correct, but what is the word? To rewrite just one word. I have a problem when people say decolonize. I don't want to go into that because it still keeps us into that bubble. But if we create a new system, it's a new system that is not connected to the bubble, that to that prison that we've been put in our minds. So, I could just be going along. Pass it on to you. Inventing the lie led to corruption of the narrative, and we have the results today. Tell us more about that.
Well, the inventing the lie, you see, sometimes people don't understand that where we find ourselves as people of African descent, it was not accidental. It was a very well thought out plan, down to the last detail. So we were stolen from our pedigree, our foreparents. They were murdered, they were raped, they were stolen from, they were kidnapped and forced and enslaved. With forced enslaved. This is what happened. Okay. And then those who did this, they knew that what they were doing was very, very wrong. Very wrong. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of them did it with Bibles in their hands. Okay? And used it erroneously to appropriate what belonged to them. They knew it was wrong. And so they created this narrative that Black people, people of African descent, even the appellation of Black, I don't know if we'll get a chance to talk about it, but this narrative, it started right there, because you see, a lot of people think that the complexion of our skin had anything to do with these Black monikers that we have. Black and white are the only two, call it people groups. I don't like races, call it people groups that have a color moniker, okay? Chinese are Chinese, Indians are Indians, Africans are not Africans, Africans are Blacks, okay? And all of those in the diaspora who are of African descent, and then Caucasians are white. Now, when this was done, the idea was to cement forever a situation where, because black was heinous, black was evil, black was defilement, black was everything that Caucasians did not like. And I've given a history as to why we came to be black as such. I mean, look at our skins, Beatrice. We are brown-skinned people known as black. That was the beginning of this lie that was invented, because we were always going to be negatively portrayed. We were always going to be no good. We were never going to be equal to the Caucasians, who saw themselves as white, not because of the color of their skin, because the color of their skin is more cream, but they saw themselves as white because they see themselves, or they saw themselves back then, as a pure people, the pure people group, the superior people group. So when you take white and black now, black being totally evil, white being totally pure, that was the basis of the color monikers that you and I have. So that was the beginning of this lie that was invented. And they simply just built on it, to the point now where many black people across the world do not like themselves. You cannot, there are some black women you will never ever see without a straight hair wig. There are some black women that the thought of their hair, if you talk to a lot of African youth today, even older Africans, one of them I talked about in the book, they don't love themselves. They think they're nothing, to the point where in North America, in Europe, all over the world right now, if you think black, you think criminality. You think black, you think about men who abandon their children. You think black women are promiscuous. You think black, you think ugly. This is the legacy that 500 years of these lies have left us. So you find us in this situation today. This was planned way back 500 years ago. So this is all part of this elaborate scheme, this elaborate lie that was built and has continued to dominate the narrative now, to the point where we have to now begin to, like you said, we have to now rewrite history from the point of truth, so that people of African descent, we can begin to see ourselves for who we have always been and who we truly are even today. Until we can do that effectively, my sister, we are not going to be able to even come and unite as a people. Because part of the lie also has been that they took our continent and chopped it up into pieces, separated brothers and sisters, and then put them at war against each other. And they continue to interfere with our reality, but they do it so subtly that most people, unfortunately, most African people, most people of African descent have no idea what's going on. So we have to change this lie, and it begins by rewriting history from the point of truth. What exactly happened?
Ooh, listening to you and having read some of the historians, people like Chekanta Diop, who spent the whole of his life trying to correct history, who demonstrated in every way possible to the rest of the world. I mean, this UNESCO conference in Paris, where he spent 80 hours trying to convince them about, Egyptology and the fact that African science began in Africa, organization, technology, everything was here. But Sam, if you and I learn history, even if we did not, if you try to put one and one together, the fact that someone invades your house, if your house is filthy, the way they say it is, if it is not, why would they invade it in the first place? Why would they stay for so long? If Africans were lazy and incompetent, why would someone take them to go build their own economy somewhere? And if we had no religions and we had no systems, why are your museums full of all our artifacts? I mean, when you do all of that and you take the evidence of what was, because when you go to the Kemite kingdom, when you start, learning this history and going back and asking those logical questions, you're like, wait a moment, how come if it was that bad, I mean, you wouldn't be, which business person, Western person, puts his money, his energy, and his time in a business that doesn't yield dividends? I mean, that doesn't give you 5,000, 10,000 more dividends. So when we just, just being curious and saying we leave away the package of colonized education and just open up to the idea of where were we then? Where were we back then? What were Africans doing before the invasion? And you come across Mansa Musa, you start seeing all those kingdoms pop up, the empire of Sundiata, the empire of Mali, the empire of Ghana, the Gold Coast, all of these things start popping up. And then you look at the museums abroad, that our artifacts are in private museums. Some are being auctioned for incredible prices. And you're wondering, does it come from the kind of people that they say we are? Why are you keeping it there? Why do you keep Patrice Lumumba's tooth in your museum? Some of these things, I think we just get curious and understand that the lie was because someone knew at some point we will have to unleash it. Something will happen. And they thought taking away the evidence and keeping in the private museums and the private spaces will stop us. And, telling it's they call it, giving them all the names that is African folks, whatever it is. But I think it just takes a little bit of reflecting. And I think reading Check and Tadiop does us a lot of good. Listening to him. Obenga is another great historian. We have people like Ivan Van Settima, who did a whole lot of exposés and histories on Egypt. We have people like John Henry Clark, and the recently, Ronoko Rashidi, who recently passed away, and of course, Professor Omotula, Kalala Omotundo. These are some people who have really opened our eyes, and your book go in the line with all of those, that really invite us to not just accept what is, but also to question. And once you start questioning and being inquisitive and doing that conversation with your children, with your colleagues, you begin to see, those rays of the truth that was supposed to be buried. Sam, we are going to come back to this conversation. We need to take a quick break. Those of you, if you're joining the conversation right now, we are launching the book, Black Truth, Healing 500 Years of Colonial Lies. And I'm in the studio with the author of this book. He's an incredible thinker, and he has laid a path that goes in line with some of the great African historians that we know. And we will take a quick break. You don't want to go away, because when we come back, we're going to walk you through the book again and just give you every reason why you should read that book, why it should be your bedtime story for you and your family. So we take a quick break and we'll be right back.
In the 21st century's technological advancement, we all seek opportunities to move and network with the emerging space. Introducing Clevenard blog and event posting. Do you think you have some interesting materials, good content, articles, and stories? Then feel free to publish them on Clevenard blog and events page, just as team of our writers are doing presently. By blogging on Clevenard's blogs and events, you benefit from our reach and network. There are constant stream of people visiting our social platform, and we have figured out just how to distribute our contents. This means you can basically skip the line and get access to a big audience from day one. Furthermore, we can help you get in touch with important people for projects with possibilities of translating your content into other languages and republishing them on Clevenard. This helps preserve and protect your content from getting lost. What's more, you also get to be part of our team with access to our network and lots of exclusives, behind the scenes information. And of course, you get full credit for everything you do, which brings you popularity and make extra income. Sign up now on clevenard.com and start blogging to your advantage. Please see the tutorial video on how to blog or post events on Clevenard blogs and events. For more information, contact info@clevenard.com +34 631 279811. Website www.clevenard.com. Clevenard, your blogs, your identity. In the 21st century's technological...
Okay. So welcome back to Follow Me to Africa Conversations, brought to you by Clevenard TV in the diaspora. We are right in here talking about Black truth, unleashing Black truth, and in an attempt to heal 500 years of colonial lies. And this is with none other but the author of the book, Black Truth and 500 Healing 500 Years of Colonial Life, my brother Sam Tita, joining us all the way from Canada. So Sam, before we went on break, we were talking about the fact that, just a little bit of thinking makes us understand where, see the lies. It really puts the lies in front of you. And in your book, you say, because in the survivor of the fittest, there is no love, there is no forgiveness, and there is no generosity. How do we turn around and become generous in the way we source for information and the kind of information that we do, because it helps us? The lie set us in a bubble of an identity crisis, all kinds of identity crisis. And before we went on break, also you were saying the notion of black and white was done. And I would like to add something on top for us to reflect. Also, it was a set of confusion because you can't say you're African. In South Africa, people will tell you, no, I don't look like you, but I'm African. And they call themselves Afrikaner. In German, they called me Afrikanerin. A man will be Afrikaner. That's the German word. But when you go to South Africa, the Afrikaner is a white person. And they are having their own country inside of South Africa where no black person is allowed. And so this identity crisis that you can say you're an African without someone else coming in to say I'm African. So is it part of, all of that, all of the construction of the lie and the destruction of identity and that sense of Africanness that you talk about in your book? And how do we get fit? How do we get fit and generous and forgiving to ourselves for not embracing ourselves? Not forgiving forgiving them because we already did anyway. But how do we become fitter, generous, and forgiving in the sense that allowed us to walk through the lie and ignite the path of healing?
I think thanks for the question, Beatrice. But I think truth is the pathway to help us get there. Like you said, forgiveness has happened in a lot of quarters from those who are aware of what has happened. Unfortunately, the larger population of Africans have no concept of what has actually happened and continues to happen. So for them, life is grand, life is good. This is our lot in life. This is who we were made to be. This is what the world has told us we are, and so they accept it and they're trying to better themselves. And for a lot of them, it is about going west. That's what betterment. So forgiveness has happened in the quarters where, for those of us who know, we know that to hold unforgiveness and to hold hate in our hearts towards these people who have tormented us for so long, it doesn't help us. It is actually better that we forgive them. All right. So that has happened. But then the path towards selecting to be generous to ourselves, to select, the kind of history that we want to look into, the things that we want to, we're attracted to, the kind of learning, knowledge that we seek. I think it really just comes down to knowing what the truth is, and being a person who has an investigative mind, who wants to know what is actually going on. Like you said so eloquently, you don't really have to be a great thinker. You don't have to be Sheikh Anta Diop. You don't have to be Wole Soyinka. You don't have to be Nelson Mandela. You just have to be a person who is curious. Why would you want to call yourself an African when you are clearly not originally from there? If Africa is this terrible, poor, horrible, miserable place, why do you want to do that? Why would there are Canadian companies, American companies, European companies who have been down there for hundreds of years, and when they have shut down, others have come and taken their place. Why would you want to do that to a place that is Who wants to go and build a house in the middle of the Sahara Desert? Unless they know that there is something underneath the ground, all of that sand that nobody else knows about. So the truth is this, if you are listening, Africa is not poor. The whole world depends on the resources that are in Africa. The whole world. As a matter of fact, an author whose name I don't remember in my research, and I can pull it up, it might actually be in the book. This author said, the world's economies, not North America's or Europe's, the economies of the world are designed to thrive only as long as Black people are kept down, Africans are kept down. Because the moment we come to the truth about who we actually are and we take control, the economies of the world, most of them will crumble. Because now Africa is going to demand fair market price for her resources. And not just for her natural minerals and resources, but also for her human capital. Because this is what used to happen. The companies went down for human capital in the way of free forced labor, not free, but forced labor. Okay, hence they were kidnapped and enslaved. Now they stayed there for the natural resources, but today companies like Microsoft, Twitter, Alibaba, Amazon, Google, Facebook, these are the biggest companies in the world, and they are all in Africa. Why? What are they doing there if a miserable, poor place? Amazon is building a $3 billion facility in South Africa, and then they're going to do something in Nigeria, and then I think something in Kenya and Ghana as well. Oh my goodness, Beatrice, there is so much going on that we as Africans are unaware of. And what they've been able to successfully do is what I called the pawn shop syndrome, which I talk about in the book. You see, for those of you who know what a pawn shop is, this is a place where when you have your valuables and you are strapped for cash, you go there and they will buy these things from you, these valuables. You can take my $200 watch, you go there, you will be lucky if you get $10 for it, $10. Okay, but this is the thing. The person who is running the pawn shop, his entire business is predicated on the fact that people who have valuables will bring them to him. He will buy them at very cheap, and then he will resell them at their real value. This is what a pawn shop business is based on, and we all know it. Yet, Beatrice, when you take anything valuable to the pawn shop, this guy goes through his dance and the rigmarole of all of the process that he puts us through. He puts people to make them think that he is doing them a favor buying their valuable items. He's doing them a favor. He's helping them. And he tells you, listen, I don't really need this, okay? But if you're desperate, I'll help you. This is the story that the West has told Africans for so long, that all of these gold and cobalt and diamonds and coltan and all of these precious oil that you have, it's not worth much. It is only worth what we tell you it's worth. As a matter of fact, you can't do anything with it yourselves. Give it to us, okay? We're going to take it. We're going to take care of it, and then we'll give you a little fee. This is what is going on.
Development aid.
So something so valuable, we've been brainwashed to the point where Africans, with all of the resources we have, most of them, their whole lives, they just want to go out west, where they will go west and wash dishes. They will go west and work in homes, taking care of people who are sick, jobs that the Westerners themselves don't want to do. This is what our people today in the Middle East, so many Africans are put into slavery again in the 21st century because they leave all of the valuable, precious things they have. And they think they've been brainwashed so much. They think Dubai is the place to be, and London and Toronto. Okay. And that's why we are consciously, my wife and I, we are consciously beginning to repatriate assets and resources that we have here back home to build there so that we're not just talking. You can't just talk this talk, just like you, Beatrice. You were talking and you moved back and you say, follow me back to Africa. This is not a conversation you can have and then go back to your house, turn on your Netflix and say, man, I've done my part. I've done my own talking. No, 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 no. It requires action. It demands action. That's how we're going to get our people seeing the light, seeing the truth about who we are. And Beatrice, I promise you, as you already know, change is beginning to happen already. There is a renaissance going on with people like you moving back with all of your education and connections and all the work that you've done all over the world. You chose Africa. We have chosen Africa and so many more. When this momentum grows, everything in the world is going to change. And the Westerners know it, and that's why they've been trying so hard and continue to do so, trying to prevent it. But it's too late. It's too late. The momentum has already picked up.
If you allowed me, I would just put some figures. They say numbers don't lie. Mm-hmm. In your book on page 44, you telling us as of February 20th, 2008, Africa holds a strategic global position with approximately 30% of the world's remaining mineral resources. So you say 17% of the world's, Africa represents 17% of the world's population. It's 9.6% of global oil output. It has 90% of the world's platinum deposits, 90% of the world's cobalt deposit, 50% of the world's gold deposit, 66% of the world's magnesium deposit, 35% of the world's uranium, and 75% of the world's coltan. And we know that the industries in the world, and this is just a tip of the iceberg. This is just a tip of the iceberg. When we go down to look at other mineral resources that are here, and you just begin to think, if we have all of this, what is happening? A couple of years back, I read a newspaper article that said that was quoting one of the CEOs of Coca-Cola, who said the money they make in Africa is 10 times more than what they make in all the rest of the world put together. And they tell us we're poor. In Soweto, where they will tell you this is a township, if you know the consumption rate, how much money is spent in Soweto, and most of these big brands are moving into Soweto. I mean, the luxury brands, they're all not just across Africa, but they're also in the what they call the shanty towns and the shacks. So when you look at this, you're wondering, like, what should we be seeing? There's something out there. And I'm glad when we put out the figures and invite people to understand that when you see these numbers, these are the numbers that others are seeing. We need to see these numbers in order to be able to realize the greatness, the richness of the continent that we call home. And so, Sam, in your book, someone is knocking at my door right now. Mm-hmm. So in your book, you give us some stages. You give us, what needs to be the psychological warfare. Tell us a little bit about the psychological warfare and how this is related to this extent of resources that our continent has.
Well, thank you, Beatrice. If we've made one, I think, significant contribution into this narrative, it is this issue of the psychological warfare that has been waged against people of Africans and African descent for 500 years. Because when, the slave trade itself, yes, that ended several hundred years ago. And a lot of people say, well, slave trade has ended, so what's the big deal? Let's move on. But the truth is that the more terrible, the more devious work is still happening. And this is the work where it's not some Caucasian person with a whip forcing you to do things. It is one where you have trained yourself to work against your own interests. This is the psychology left us. Just as an example, I came up with this concept of what I called the chasm of impossibility. I talked about it, I alluded to it when we talked about the black and white monikers that has been appended to those of us of African descent, and of course those from of European descent. Because you see, if they, for instance, spoke the truth that they were cream-colored people and we are brown-skinned people, naturally you see that there is a relationship between the color cream and the color brown. You see, because when you take even white and you mix it with brown, you get this cafe au lait, this kind of a creamish kind of color. So there is grounds for mixing, you see. But when they wouldn't do it that way, because if they do it that way, then they're saying that there is some kind of grounds for African people and European people to be maybe the same, even though we have the same heart, we have the same blood, we have the same organs and everything. The only difference is really the pigment of the pigmentation that we have. That is the major difference that we have as a people. But that is not good enough. They had to create a situation. There was such a difference between the two of us. Now, in real life, that difference does not exist. So they had to create one psychologically, because if you accept it, you would pass it down generations and it would go unhindered. It would cost them absolutely nothing to continue to do this. And so they came with the black and white. So black and white are so opposed to one another that there is no way that you could even compare the two of them as colors. And so I call it a chasm of impossibility, because there is no way, there is no relationship, even though in the natural that relationship exists. Psychologically, they're saying there is no relationship. Another chasm of impossibility, this thing about you're black, you're white. They say Africa is the poorest nation in the world, when in fact it isn't. You see, so you have this thing now. They say everything that has to do with you and I are of the third world. Everything that has to do with them is of the first world. Beatrice, when was the last time you had a conversation with anyone and they talked about being from the second world? It never happens. They know that in our minds we are, but nobody wants to voice it out. So you're of the third world, we're of the first world. There is no second world. That second world is that chasm of impossibility, because you can, even when you travel from your African root, your African nation from the African continent, and you come into Europe, you have already been, you have already been trained psychologically to know that, well, I am of the third world. Even though my feet might be on what they call the so-called first world, I am so third world, there is no room. Because you see, if you have 1, 2, 3, then naturally you can move from 3 to 2 and from 2 to 1. But if there is no 2, the chasm is so big, you can never jump psychologically from 3 to 1. We've been trained that it is impossible. So if you are thinking that, and they're of the first world, then naturally, even when you are living, your feet are planted in the ground in what is called the first world, you already know psychologically that you are not up to par with these people. That too, now the second world that doesn't exist, that is the chasm of impossibility. It was not, it was intentional, so that we would be impacted psychologically about this. So you find that people who, it's like this young man that we met in Cameroon some time ago, and he was dancing and he said he was Michael Jackson. And my wife and I, we said to him, please don't call yourself Michael Jackson. Be who God has created you to be. Whatever talent you have as a dancer, call yourself by your own name. Because this is the truth. The moment you meet with Michael Jackson in real life, you become absolutely zero. You become non-existent. You become an absolute nothing, because the real thing is now present. You see, so if we have this belief that nothing, compared to the Caucasians. You see, even with your education, even with your beauty and your accomplishments, the moment you sit in a boardroom or in any kind of contest that involves you and a Caucasian person, right away you begin to think, am I up to par? Am I going to be discriminated against? Are they going to say no to me because of my hairstyle, because of the color of my skin?
There is something, sometimes it's not even in your head. You get reminded. You get
Yes,
reminded. I
yes.
remember back then when I used to do my conferences in Austria, my diversity conferences, I had some of these topmost CEOs, Walt Disney, the vice president of Walt Disney, Bank of America, L'Oreal, they were all in there. And it's interesting when it comes to talking about it. Oh, Beatrice, how long have you been in Austria? Oh, where did you do your hair? Oh, where did you learn German? You know, you're reminded not the level of your competence, it's taken into consideration, but you're reduced to that, that, I mean, this is my conference, you're at my event, but let me not go there. Let me know. I was just kind of giving another example that is so typical. You at your event, I mean, you bring all these people together and they tell you, oh, what is your experience with racism? And you think, I'm an expert right here. I'm not here to talk about, that's your concept, not mine.
Mhm,
But Sam, how does this, we're running out of time,
mhm.
but I wouldn't want us to stop the conversation without, linking this conversation here, the psychological warfare, to the concept of what you call white privilege. Talk about that, please. White privilege, not privilege.
Yes. Well, the thing is, all right. For those in the
Please go.
academy, the concept of white privilege is something that is a staple. Okay, we talk about it, we write about it, we do papers on it, we do conferences about it. But you see, the thing is, the lady who came up, who conceptualized white privilege, when she came up with it, I think her heart was in the right place, because in white privilege, she talked about the unearned back or knapsack of benefits that people who are Caucasian, they get by default. So you live in a community where everybody speaks your language, most of the people look like you, all of the systems in education and even the church and music and media, they're all fashioned for your benefit. When I go to do a contract, if I'm bidding for a contract to do business, I'm constantly thinking, are they going to on the basis of what we can do, but on the basis of the color of my skin? These are things that we have to deal with. So psychologically, we are hampered. In the real world, we have impediments. So this is what Peggy, I forget her last name now, but Peggy, she calls it white privilege. All right. But then this is the thing. I am saying, and I argued this, privilege is something that it's either earned or acquired. You see, it has to be given to you freely by someone who has authority and the right to give it to you, or you have to earn it. But when privilege is given by a people who stole, murdered, raped, pillaged, and so they have all of these advantages and they give it to their posterity. Well, that is no longer privilege. That is pillage, because the reason you have this so-called privilege is because your people stole it. Beatrice, if I steal someone's car today and I go to sell it, if you buy it and give me money, you're in trouble because you lose that money. Because the thing is, I had no right in the first place to sell you that vehicle because it never really belonged to me in the first place. To say that white privilege exists in itself, it normalizes the fact that it was okay for these guys to rape, to pillage, and to steal. It normalizes it. It legitimizes it. When in fact we should be crying out to say, it belongs to us. Give it back. Let's have an even playing field. Take Europe if that's what you want. Give us back what belongs to us. Because I am sitting here thinking, before we got into studying and got the insights that we were sharing, you're thinking, well, what about my foreparents? They were useless. They never did anything for us. But look at all the Caucasian people. Alexander the Great, this person and that person, and Louis the this and the King of Edward, all of this stuff. They did stuff for their people. What about our people? Where is the privilege that we have? Okay, so privilege is not privilege at all. Privilege is either earned or given by someone with authority and the right to do so, to convene that privilege. What exists right now, even though Peggy McIntosh had the right heart to discuss white privilege, the truth is, I think she just helped to legitimize what Caucasians did to people of African descent and Africa so many years ago. And so it is more white pillage than white privilege. That is the position that I have taken.
I like that. I like that correction. It's absolutely necessary that we redefine some of the things. You know, some of the concept, even the concept of third world, developing countries, now with the emerging economies and all of that, black and all of those notions and definitions, they came from, and then also the word slaves. You know, I say my ancestors were not born slaves. No. I'm glad that in your conversation, just like I captured and enslaved. And when you know history, you know that Africans fought. There are Africans who fought. So the people out there who will tell you, oh, Africans were selling Africans anyway, that's not true. That's the narrative, the corrupted narrative, the invented lie that you talk about. And I think we really have to be very careful when we read through the realms of history and try to understand how things really went back then. Because again, history was written by the people, the perpetrators wrote history. And even though we had our oral history, we were reduced to illiterate. My grandmother did not go to school. She could neither read nor write. But the intelligence of this woman, but because she is defined, if you put her in the context that was brought in, she's an illiterate. You know, they label her illiterate, and you will put her on the lines of illiterate. And this is a woman who led, who fought, who she's an incredible, and we have so many of such. So when we define ourselves in the definitions that have been given to us by the oppressor, we will always find ourselves wanting. We will always not feel enough. And then we will pass that on to our children. And you know, when we dwell on that not being enough, it's something that multiplies, it amplifies, and it becomes our reality. It's our narrative and our reality from generation to generation. And I think I love the fact that we're writing books now, that we're becoming more articulate and having this kind of conversations, just so that if one person takes away and start thinking different, we have a mission accomplished. There's one person out there who, you know, one seed that is sown. And this is the essence of this conversation. Before we go, I would like to touch on one more thing. I know our audience out there, please bear with us. We started a little bit late and we should have been off, but we just want to. The book is so intense. It's so intense that there's so many layers that needs to be peeled off to be understood. And Sam, you talk about the complicit. You talk about the different structures of our society that are complicit. Can you put that in a nutshell for us? You know, the complicit, the structures that still hold us captive in mental enslavement, and how can we break out of that in a nutshell? Please.
In a nutshell.
Yes.
Well, I talk about, you know, the media and the academy, and I talked about the church. The church is supposed to be the bastion of all that is equitable and loving. But like I said before, a lot of these times, even in recent times, when George Floyd was murdered right here in the United States, the church was silent. They were talking about the Holy Spirit and this and all of that stuff, and completely silent on the terrible things that were being done here. Jesus would not have done that. So the church has been complicit in perpetrating this terrible harm against Africans and people of African descent. The church, the so-called church anyway, even sent people to the continent with the idea of propagating the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, I'm a Bible teacher, so I'm speaking from a position of absolute authority, okay? But they sent the people down there, whereas they were really looking for ways to brainwash the people and to have markets for their products and natural resources for their furnaces in Europe, and labor as well. And then you have the academy. The academy is complicit because how do you, Beatrice, in which textbook are you going to read that Leopold III of Belgium murdered 10 million plus Congolese? Now we talk about what happened in Germany to the Jews, and it was a terrible thing. But there were not enough Jews. There was the number of Africans that were murdered by Leopold alone in the Congo. It is twice, at least twice, what happened to the Jews in the hands of Hitler. But you don't see this in the textbooks. So what has happened is they have completely deleted, they erased stories and histories of Africans. So that when people read textbooks, it's just like in the United States and in Canada right now, I don't know anywhere else in the world, but we have this thing called Black History Month. And I'm saying, I want Black history every day. I don't want to be given a special 1 month of Black history. I want my history to be intertwined with the global history narrative. Let it be known that the Europeans came to a people who had kingdoms, who had governments, who had institutions, and they raped them, and they pillaged them, and they killed them, and they kidnapped them. This is what needs to be in the history books. And they brought us over here. And in spite of all of that, we continue to thrive. We continue to invent. We continue to be a people that are accomplishing things. This is what we need to know, that Africa today is going through what Africa should have gone through 300 or 200 years ago. So now we have a situation, America. How long ago was America fighting a war within itself? It was just a few hundred years ago. And then when you have people in Africa disputing against each other, fighting against each other, quarreling against each other, they call us uncivilized. And they have to, they want to fly Caucasians down there to tell us how to do things. If they had not truncated our development as a people by coming in there to invade and to steal and to kill and to do all the terrible things they did, we too would have gone through the things that China went through, the things that Europe went through and America went through. And we would not be fighting ourselves today because we would have progressed naturally like everybody else. These are the things we need to be aware of.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you. This conversation can't end here. It's a conversation that we need to continue. And I think one aspect that we did not even touch on is the economics. The economics of the falsification of the narrative. Yes. You know, what it costs us in terms of the money, the purchasing power, you know, the money that is taken out or the money that is made. I mean, when you look at the cosmetic industry with all the straight hair and all the skin whitening products that are against the melanin, and also when you look at the fact that melanin is actually being researched and created in the labs for the Caucasian skin color, because the power of melanin is just incredible. These are some of the things that we even did not touch on. And they're the conversations that we need to have when we have to ignite that healing, that when we have to allow ourselves to heal so that we get out of the bubble and become full-fledged human beings who can think and act without always carrying that level of decolor, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so that the next generation hasn't got to keep going through what the 500 years of, you know, colonization has brought us into. So Sam, and I know we haven't even touched on, you know, started this conversation. That was just like a kind of a teaser. And it is provoked by your book, Black Truth, 500 Years of Healing 500 Years of Colonial Lies. And I'm incredibly thankful that you wrote that book. I can just invite people to read the book. Please, this is so beautifully written. It's not an academic book like you say in the beginning of the book. You really struck the balance between making it a bedtime story. You know, it's something, take a chapter, you and your children, read it when you're going to bed. Take a chapter when, you know, post it on your social media, reflect on it, do your own research, come up with some other numbers and some other stories. Let it be like that invitation that Sam is dishing out to you. And that's the credo of our Follow Me to Africa journey. It's about kind of inviting you to be part, not from afar. And we bring you conversations that give you content, give you the permission, if you need permission, to be able to stand in your Africanness. That's how I call it. Stand tall in your Africanness and be proud of who you are, where you come from, because the legacy is vast. And the identity is incredibly powerful when you know all of what it is about. Sam, your final words, please, for your concluding words, let's put it that way, concluding words for this session of our conversation.
Concluding word is to those of us who look like we do, it is our time. It is our time. Truth has been revealed. not just through this book, but there are so many, Beatrice, and so many people who have done the work. Do the research and get to know who you actually are. That process will bring you healing, but it will also empower you to be able to make the kind of contribution that the world needs today. And that would be my final word to those of us who are listening today.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners, those of you who tune in today. You want to watch out for my next book. It's called Trailblazer. And Sam, in that book, I just profiled 100 women of African descent who were the first to this first, we have to question that word first because it's still part of the narrative to make you think that they were not there. So those who are coming up now are the first. But we're saying in post-colonial Africa and in the diaspora, there are those who, in spite of the shackles of enslavement, made it up to the position, the highest executive political offices in their countries. In Africa, we have 42 female presidents and prime ministers. America has just one. In how many years? And in Europe, we have women who have become ministers. In North and South America, we have governor generals and all of presidents and prime ministers. So they're all in one book that I just finished, which will be launched sometimes next month. And this is part of the truth that we need to know so that we don't think that someone has to come teach us about gender equality in whatever fields. We have always been a matriarchal society. So we invite you to do your own reading, do your own research. Don't believe what we tell you, but take it as an invite to go do your own research and find your own truth so that you can ignite your own path of healing. The Follow Me to Africa conversations will continue next Friday, and we will bring you another very powerful African who is doing the job. And I would like to invite you to check my profile on cliffnot.com, cliffnottv.com or cliffnot.com for some other upcoming events like the Homecomers Day, African Parenting Days, and a couple of other programs that are coming up. So you don't want to miss out on that. My name is Anquita Beatrice Achaleke. This conversation has been really long, but it was overdue. And I want to thank the studio and the person who is behind this conversation, the mastermind of behind cliffnottv.com for the indulgence, and for you, our audience out there, please text us, write to us, tell us what kind of other conversations you want us to have on this platform. And if you have history, please share the history. Start with the history of your family. History is not the history book. It starts with the story of your family. Do you know your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents? Who were they? What is it that they do? We challenge you to do that. That's where history starts from. That's where the healing process starts from. And you will be amazed at what you find. So we have to end the conversation. Sam, thank you so much. I'm still in my emotional space. Sam, thank you so much for writing that book, for joining the conversation, and for sharing your findings and inviting us to do the work and to heal.
Thank you. My absolute pleasure, Beatrice. Thank you, and thank you for the work that you do. It's been an absolute blast.
Thank you. You're tuned in on CliffNote TV in the diaspora, and right now we are out. Goodbye.